All right, my friends, welcome back. It's the Weekend Interview Show. I'm Scott Horton. I'm talking with Dean Tong. His website is abuse-excuse.com. He's a forensic consultant and expert witness in child abuse cases. He's the author of the books Elusive Innocence, Ashes to Ashes, Families to Dust, Don't Blame Me, Daddy, and Love and Loathing. And this is very interesting stuff. To me, I think I said at the beginning, I'm really torn on this topic because on one hand, I don't believe that the state should exist at all, and I don't ever want to be the one providing pressure from below for them to have an excuse to take anyone's money or do anything with it. On the other hand, their basic mandate, if we are to have a nation state at all, their basic mandate is to protect life and liberty, and that means even to protect the child from their parents, obviously. So then the question comes in, when is it okay for the state to come and take away somebody's kids? And I'm really torn because I've had friends who have been hassled because their neighbor decided they wanted to settle a score. Oh, that's the guy that brought back my wheelbarrow all dented up. I'm going to call the CPS on him. And then on the other hand, I am personally attached to a very beautiful young lady who would have been living a life in hell if it not for the CPS who came and delivered her to safety. So this is one of those things that's really hard for a libertarian to deal with, and basically to help me figure out my own position on this topic is Dean Tong. And Dean, I have an idea. And this may sound insane, but what about this? What if they couldn't take the kids unless they actually arrested the parent? How about a criminal charge to go with taking the kids away?
That's not going to work, Scott, because from a judicial legal standpoint, of course, as I alluded to, I consult in these cases for a living 24/7. They would have to garner 95% evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to attain a conviction. So the way they get out of that is they get you in juvenile court, what's called youth court or dependency court, and only have to prove by preponderance of evidence to take your child, which is 51%, not 95%. And then to terminate your parental rights, if you don't comply with their case plan or performance agreement and jump through their hoops, 75% is called, or termed clear and convincing evidence to actually terminate your parental rights.
Which, again, is all flawed because there's no such thing as a percentage of quality anyway.
Right. But my point is, it's not just CPS that is an error here. And let me premise this by the fact that only 2 to 7% of all these cases are false witch hunts. In other words, where somebody's out to get Scott Horton and they pick up a telephone and they want to ruin your life. Only about 5% on a national cap average are we talking about false premeditated witch hunts. About 2/3 of these cases, however, are mistakes, errors, what's called in psychology source misattribution errors, where the system got it wrong. I had another case, I told you about the little PP case. I had another case where the African-American family hired me, and their little boy had bruises all over his face. Of course, the CPS and the court gleaned that it was physical child abuse, but what it was Mongolian warts, a genetic defect. So, again, what we don't know that we don't know comes back to bite us on these cases. So that's why we need to further educate and train our people that are out there in the field making basically life-altering decisions among children and families.
Right.
And it's very important that the people out there that are listening to this interview understand that CPS is not just a problem here, but it's also the courts, because ultimately it's the judge who's making the decision whether to keep that child from the family or not.
Right. And I think it is a very good point to bring up to remind folks that everybody, even government employees, are individuals, and each social worker may or may not be the kind of person that you want being a social worker. I've met personally 2 different social workers who seem like great ladies to me, although both of them told me when I asked them, hey, tell me this, how many kids do you think are taken from their families who really shouldn't be? And both of these women told me, probably about 10%. 1 out of 10 children taken away. This is in Austin, Texas. 1 out of 10 children taken away from their parents probably shouldn't have been. Now, of course, none of those 1 out of 10 were because of them. It was, of course, all the other social workers back at the office who would make such mistakes. But that means 10 out of 100, 100 out of 1,000 cases, these kids are taken away when it's really not justified at all. That's a pretty high error rate, I would say.
Well, it is, and again, there are social workers of all different colors and shapes and sizes. That said, there are some that are well-meaning and well-intentioned, but they are misguided. They rule on ideology, kids don't lie, must be believed or protected at all costs, versus empirical data and the science behind this. And that's why most of the reason I win my cases is I use real bona fide experts. In fact, as an attorney, I do some cases with, not too far from you, in Plano for Texas. But, the point is with the social workers and the folks out there listening can go to some of the following websites, nasw.org, which is the National Association of Social Workers, or CWLA.org, Child Welfare League of America. These people, again, they're money-driven, they're contract-driven, they're bureaucracy-driven. And, that's unfortunate because you get so many cases, and again, I alluded to earlier, 3 million reports a year for all 50 states. That's a lot of cases. That's a lot of reports. That's a lot of children.
Yeah, and if 10%...
Those 3 million reports might encompass 10 million kids.
Right. Okay, hold it right there. We're about to go out to break. It's the Weekend Interview Show. Everybody think back. Remember that King of the Hill? It's one of the first episodes of King of the Hill where Bobby gets hit in the head with a baseball and Hank almost loses him forever. Be right back.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
All right, my friends, welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show on the Republic Broadcasting Network. I'm Scott Horton, and my guest is Dean Tong. His website is abuseexcuse.com. He's the author of the books Elusive Innocence, Ashes to Ashes, Families to Dust, Don't Blame Me, Daddy, and Love and Loathing. Interesting title there, Love and Loathing, Protecting Your Mental Health and Legal Rights when your partner has borderline personality disorder. What's borderline personality disorder? Is that like the mom on The Sopranos?
Actually, Scott, it's a 301.83 in the DSM-4. It's a pervasive personality mental health disorder that is featured by usually women. I'm not trying to be gender stereotype here, but of the 6 million people that show this disorder, 75% of the same are women. But typically suicidal ideations, histrionic-type behavior, self-mutilation. The way it got its name were people who got involved in borderline relationships. So many of these borderline people, usually women, are on the verge of divorcing. And I think the central thing here with these people is they can't see gray. They only see black or white, what's called splitting, which means when you get involved with these people, you're going to wind up in protracted litigation. You're going to be going to court until the end. And a lot of these people are required to go on Prozac or Paxil or Zoloft or Wellbutrin, some antidepressant by a psychiatrist. And it is a very severe disorder.
Which reminds me, I didn't get to ask you whether you had a happy ending to your case.
Well, happy in that the state of Florida dropped charges against me, but unhappy in that I never got to see my kids alone overnight until they emancipated and reached the age of 18. Oftentimes in these cases, while CPS gets the ball rolling, the courts err on the side of caution, on the side of abuse, on the side of children. It's in that Las Vegas 50% crapshoot line, and it's a dice toss, and the courts they're just not sure, so they're not going to make the mistake by putting the child back with a possible predator, and that way they would rather do a parentectomy or what I call a fatherectomy, and eviscerate father from the life of the child and vice versa. And they do it quite often. I don't leave it in that area. Obviously, when I get involved in cases, again, as I alluded to, take no prisoners. This is a war. We use very credentialed experts But people out there listening need to understand that the system has unlimited resources. When I get involved, you get as much justice as you can afford. Sad but true. This is America. The only way you're really going to beat these people and defeat them at their own game is to spend money and hire real experts.
You know, you talked about earlier how the children are, I guess there's probably nothing in the law that actually says it this way, but at least they're de facto wards of the state. The government basically lets you have your own kids as long as they feel like it. And this brings up the question to me. In fact, the first time I ever heard the term ward of the state, I was told that I was a ward of the state by my government school principal when I was in 9th grade, to which I replied, big F you, I belong to my father, and I ran. But this brings up to me the idea that really the biggest child abusers in America is the government in the first place, in the government schools. There's a story, I don't know if you go to the LouRockwell.com blog, there's a story up there from yesterday about a 5-year-old girl who was handcuffed by the police in her government school. And the guy who entered the blog entry went on to comment that if she does not learn her lesson, that she's going to do what the state says or else. If she does not take her lesson well, she's going to find her brain full of psychotropic drugs. Or they're going to, and this has happened many times that I've heard of, you have to give your kids Paxil or lithium or Prozac or Ritalin, and if you don't, you're going to lose your kid.
Well,
you're not putting them on drugs.
You know, make no mistake, the state originally, out of the gate, does call the shots. Again, if you have deep pockets, if you have that war chest and you can hire me as the consultant, you can get an expert attorney, a dream team with the right medical and mental health experts involved. You know, it's not going to be CPS's way. It's not going to be the government's way. But these people have a lot of money to spend. This is a huge industry, as I've mentioned. You know, they're going to try to cover their own. It's the fox guarding the hen house. And they can order your kid to be put on drugs against your permission. They can interview your child at school without your permission. They can have medical rape examinations done of your child without your permission. They can conduct structured forensic interviews.
Wait,
not structured at all.
Let me stop you right there on the.
They do it all the time.
Let me stop you right there on the examination, the rape examination. If a child has not been raped and yet goes through that examination, that would probably be the most traumatic thing to happen to them in their life up until that point, right?
Good point.
Dragged out of class and examined by a stranger?
The scientific data on that was authored by a couple of psychologists out of Texas A&M University, Hickman and Reynolds, in 1994. So, unfortunately, Scott, CPS, and many of the courts and many of the attorneys have never seen this data. They don't understand that a non-abused child treated as a truly molested victim can be victimized just as much as a kid who actually has been raped.
Right. What about homeschoolers? Are they more likely to be targeted by CPS types?
Yeah, they are. Anybody who believes in spanking, homeschooling, doing anything that would be contrary to the mindset of the government or governmental child protective investigator or intake worker is more susceptible and vulnerable to, to basically their wrath and investigation.
The law does allow for simple spanking on the bottom and that kind of thing, doesn't it?
Well, I'd have to go back and check the Texas statutes on that, but I know I was very instrumental here in Florida in getting what the media touted the spanking bill passed in 1998, whereby you could actually spank your child so long as you did not leave significant welts or bruises on the child. If you did that, you went too far and you could be charged with physical child abuse. But the line between corporal punishment and physical child abuse is not very clear. It's very ambiguous and vague, and for parents who don't know, you better be careful because you could cross that line.
Well, and like you say, you've mentioned a few times about how much money it takes to defend yourself from a case like this. What if you just don't have any money to hire Dean Tong to help be your consultant? You're just screwed. You lose your kid. You never see him again.
I mean, there are some websites out there, cpswatch.com. Vocalinfo.org that can help you. There are organizations out there that are activists that fight together. They go to the media. They go to ombudsmen. They go to anybody they can go to get their story heard to try to fight City Hall. This is a very devastating issue, financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and otherwise. And if you don't have the resources to fight back, or if you expended all of your resources because you picked the wrong